All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Mallory Johnson, 25-year beauty veteran, consultant, and strategist. Welcome to Pretty Equity, where we tackle the real issues plaguing beauty founders and investors and bring you the answers from the experts behind the scenes. Influencers don't just amplify brands, they accelerate demand faster than regulatory systems, manufacturing infrastructure, and supply chains can safely respond. When a product goes viral, brands face four simultaneous pressures: regulatory exposure from uncontrolled claims, consumer harm from misuse and hacks, legal liability tied to FDA and FTC accountability, and scale up stress that exposes whether their businesses were built for growth or just momentum. Quick heads up though, today's conversation isn't about whether influencers are good or bad. It's about what happens when virality outruns governance. So, to help us unpack it all, I'm joined today by two guests, as you can see. So, this is going to be a little different than our usual conversation, one-on-one. Today we have, once again, Jennifer Cannon, who we know and love, and the other who is new to the program, Blakely Despres. Ladies, welcome to our first panel discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Jen, yes, absolutely. Jen, let's start with you because you've been with us before. So if you can give the audience a quick reminder of who you are for those who did not watch our discussion on episode 8.
Oh, they missed some good tea in episode 8. They have to watch it. But thank you for having me. This is like one of my favorite topics. Love being on. And I've been doing this product development, working in the beauty industry since the 90s, a very long time, the 90s, and started in my career with QVC, the whole HSN. And we pretty much set the blueprint for how beauty is sold in live television today, and sort of how influencers work. So been involved for a very long time, and I guess we were the beginning of things going viral.
Mm-hmm. And Blakely, as this is your first time joining us, could you tell the audience a bit about your very fascinating background?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm Blakely Dupre. I am the founder of a small communications firm, and I focus on working with beauty and consumer brands on strategic communications. And so what that means is I help brands clarify their messaging and scale their visibility and think proactively about risk as they grow. And for me, the key there is just making sure that there's consistent messaging from R&D to marketing to leadership, making sure everyone's on the same page. Um, so my background is actually started in leading strategic marketing and communications for federal government clients. Recently moved over into the beauty space because I had the linkage of working with the Department of Health and wanting to understand more about compliance and regulations coming from federal government clients. And so now I'm spending a lot of time just helping brands align what they say publicly with what they can operationally and legally support. So I would say I'm fascinated by influencer-driven growth because it can be successful, but also there is a required infrastructure to sustain it, and I love building that. So
That's awesome. And just for all of those out there, please, apologies. Blakely, I totally butchered your last name. So Dupre, okay, my bad. That was like the target is Target. So, my bad, my bad. Okay, so before we get serious, I want to start with a little fun because we've been in beauty long enough to certainly have seen this. We've all worked with at least one influencer who went completely rogue. You know the kind. The one who uses a product in the way it was never designed for, combines it with six other actives and a kitchen ingredient, or confidently explains how they just hacked your formula. And we're all, as the brand team, watching the video thinking, please don't tag us. Please don't tag us. Please don't tag us. So, without naming names, have either of you ever watched an influencer content about a product and thought, "Oh no, this is going to be a problem"? Jen, you want to go first?
I have, and I think I've shared some with you before.
Indeed, indeed.
Yes,
That's why I'm asking you to go
very
first.
cringy, but so entertaining. I will give them that. And I feel like though, a lot of times the ones that really want to make a breakthrough, they're going to be doing a lot more antics to try to get those views and be seen by the bigger brands. But at the same time, here we are as the brands and we're like, no, don't say that. So yes, I've experienced it, been very involved behind the scenes, etc. So fun times.
I know, right? And
Yeah.
Blakely, was there ever a moment for you that you knew the influencer had gone too far? And with that, was it ever just funny and first until you realized that this is actually becoming terrifying?
Yeah, so I actually follow an account on Instagram that I love for this very reason. It is a dermatologist influencer who creates stitches of other people's content that's out on TikTok and Instagram. And on this very topic, it's people who are doing really outrageous things with products or creating hacks and putting the content out there like it's a good idea. And then he, kind of breaks it down from a more educational standpoint as a medical care provider of why that's not a good idea. And so it's part comedy, part educational. And so I see his stitches all the time. Ergo, I see people doing weird things all the time. Some of the things that stick out to me are like slathering a retinoid on and then putting saran wrap over it. That's scary.
Oh
That
God,
hurts my
why?
skin barrier too
Why?
much. Another one I see a lot, and it's kind of innocent, but using like hypochloric acid and then immediately putting on like an antioxidant serum, and it's like, oh, that kind of kills the effect you were going for. So, some of
Mm-hmm.
them are a little bit more harmless, some of them are truly outrageous. But for me, the corner of the internet that's the most troubling right now is just where skincare meets wellness, meets like biohacking and anti-chemical rhetoric. And I see this a lot with people claiming they, can create their own sunscreen at home, or they have like a very anti-stance against ingredients that are bona fide, but they can't pronounce them, and so they don't want to use them. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that kind of rhetoric right now.
No, 100%, 100%. I did see one somebody sent me the other day that made me laugh out loud. It was an eye cream hack, where they used a vaginal, you know, cream. I'm not really
This is
sure.
actually a thing, though. I mean, because of what the estrogen, probably.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what they were
Was it a
going for
hormone
there.
one, or was it for like was like a monostat
No, 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 no. It it
or a
it
hormone
was
one?
it was some moisturizing, for dryness. So that was
Things that we do for beauty.
that was that was the eye cream hack. But
That's more interesting than my diaper one that I saw. The diaper rash cream.
yeah, I know you have to share that one. That was fun.
God, that's crazy. So how was the after? Was the before and after good? Did you see a difference?
You know what? They just lost me at the very beginning of this thing because I was laughing so
Yeah.
hard that I actually couldn't I couldn't pay attention, let alone breathe. So but but seriously, Blakely, from a marketing point of view, why do the most unhinged beauty hacks tend to perform the best?
No, it's all about feeding the algorithm. Unfortunately, the way that social media is set up to operate, you're going to get the most reach by saying more outrageous, more contrarian, or more thought-provoking things. Um, And obviously, a pitfall of that for a beauty brand is that everyone has a platform. Anyone can put time into growing an audience and developing that reach and kind of targeting like what their methodology is for getting bigger reach. And I think what happens is influencers get to a point where they only want to see high numbers. They want to be offered higher and higher promotional opportunities, more pay, more compensation. And so they're going to start leaning into saying those more outrageous things or creating more outrageous visuals to get to that end goal.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, for the audience, fun and games aside, the reality is that sadly, calm, compliant usage doesn't go viral the way chaos does. As they say in broadcasting, if it bleeds, it leads. Anyway, it's truth is, it's funny until it isn't. But because the same video that makes us laugh and roll our eyes can also create implied claims, encourage unsafe consumer behavior, trigger regulatory exposure, and of course, set off a demand surge that your brand wasn't necessarily ready to support. And that's where things get serious because you don't know who's watching and what they take away from what they've just saw or heard. So, girls, let's talk about when influencer content stops being entertaining and becomes risky. But before we get into that, and start talking about where things go wrong, I want to acknowledge something important for our audience. Influencers work, period. So, this isn't about awareness or vibes or reach. In beauty, influencer content can materially move product. It can accelerate trial, collapse the consideration phase, and create demand faster than most traditional marketing channels ever could. But not all influence works the same way. And there's a real difference between content that builds trust and credibility over time and content that simply spikes sales for a moment before disappearing with the algorithm. And that distinction matters because durable brand equity looks very different from a temporary surge that leaves operations quality and regulatory teams scrambling to catch up. So, before we talk about risk, I want to understand the upside first. Why this channel is so powerful when it works, and what separates real advocacy from performance driven noise. With that said, Blakely, from your marketing perspective, why do influencers work so well in beauty compared to traditional marketing?
Because influencers are basically everyday people, and what they're offering on their platforms is visual, personal trust that products are working. So they are kind of taking away or bridging the gap between the aspiration of a marketing claim and then proof that the product looks good or it performs the way that someone would want it to. So you can see texture, you could see glow, you could see coverage, you could see, irritation reduced, some kind of improvement to someone's appearance from using a product. Whereas traditional marketing is just a brand talking about itself. Having that regular person be able to advocate for a product and actually show people on an app who are scrolling, hey, this really worked for me. I think that's what accelerates marketing, a marketing strategy to hit its goals.
And Jen, because your world is so different, I mean, you come from the HSN QVC space. So, how does this compare then to the likes of that type of marketing?
I mean, for me, what's great about it is you can really, bring out those features and benefits. Ones that you wouldn't necessarily pick up on when you're just reading like an ad. Maybe you'll see it, but sometimes, you're just skimming and you're like, oh, yeah, you're just looking at the model. But when you really get to hear, what's this going to do for me? What does it do right now? Is it going to improve the appearance of this or that? And you start putting the product on. I think it really makes a connection, and I think that's why it's such a powerful way of selling. And then, we become, sort of involved in the daily lives of some of these influencers. We hear about, their updates, their families, what they're doing, and it's entertaining. So,
Mm,
very,
mm,
very powerful. And it's
mm.
definitely not going anywhere.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Like I said in the beginning, influencers work. This isn't, when we're not talking about here, whether we think they work or they don't. The bottom line is they work. We
Right,
just need to get, for our audience who are watching, we just need them to understand what they're getting themselves into if this is the direction that they want to take.
right.
So, what do you think? This is to both of you. What do you think is happening psychologically with consumers? I think we touched on it a little now, Jen, and I think you has mentioned something about that, Blakely. But does the trust actually come from, the relationships that consumers develop around, the influencers? Like you had said, Jen, you know, um, influencers, they become part of your daily life.
Mhm.
There becomes an influencer consumer relationship, which doesn't happen under normal circumstances. So Jen, I don't know if you want to kind of build a little more on that thought.
Well, I think they do become a part of our daily life, but also, having said that, the influencers, some of them, they don't really understand, maybe some of the things that they're saying are inappropriate. And then there's really been not a lot of guidance for them. So not completely, unfair. And I think they just want to say the things that are going to, help get the orders to click in. But we don't really have a format. So it's on the brands really, but a lot of times it's like I was explaining to you, these are influencers are out there looking for brands that they can go and maybe say something exciting and get signed with that brand. And I think that's why it's kind of like the Wild West out there. The ones that then become part of the brand now, I think it's become more structured. We've still had our little incidents, like with the mascara. I think one of the big influencers had the fake eyelashes on. They said may have used false eyelashes for a mascara promotion, things like that. But it's all new. So we really, back when I was on HSN QVC, we actually were very monitored. And it all started with a celebrity went on with a diet product, and she basically said it cured her weight loss problem. And
Ooh.
then they were under watch by the FTC. We all had to go through training with the legal department, myself included, so that we didn't make any false claims. And I think that we're basically in that phase right now, which is a great opportunity to really, start to maybe set some stronger guidelines.
Yeah, no, we're going to talk about the regulatory, side of this. But, for right now, just staying on the topic of this, psychologically, how consumers are developing these relationship with influencers. I don't know, Blakely, if you have any thoughts along those lines.
Yeah, and I completely agree with what Jen was saying about these parasocial relationships. When people are looking at their apps and they're scrolling day after day and they see the same people, and those people are sharing little updates about their personal lives or things they're going through, you do develop this sense of, oh, I know this person. And there's also a sense of relatability. And so when you see that person scroll after scroll over time, you're probably going to feel more confident about a purchase if it's something that they said they really liked. It's almost like your best girlfriend telling you, "Oh my gosh, you have to try this moisturizer. It's been amazing." You would probably be more apt to go check it out or to order something for yourself. And so that's, I think, kind of what's happening is influencers are able to share a little bit about themselves, and they have the consistency of the platform showing their content to their followers and to new followers. And so people are like, well, I kind of know her and that worked for her, so it'll probably work for me.
Right.
No, yeah. Jane, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
I mean, a lot of it too, I think consumers are confused. I think in the beginning, which is, the most recent phase we were just in, where it was all about maybe saving money is, oh, wow, this person's so smart. They came up with a hack that, this will save me money and I'm going to get, it's all about immediate gratification, which is what we all really want. I mean, who doesn't? So they think, oh, this is going to work. And unfortunately, then afterwards, I think they're left with, oh, well, that dupe was okay. Maybe I'll go on and try this next one and the next one and the next one. And I think they're just like, I think they've reached kind of burnout now, where we're more now entering the phase of we want proof, which is another thing that was great about, QVC, HSN, and that world, because we had to basically substantiate every single thing we were saying, or all we were allowed to do was come on and say, hi, this is my product. So I think it's nice that we've entered that phase where, now people want to see actual proof of what is this really going to do for me? Has the brand put in the work to substantiate those claims? So
Mm.
we're evolving.
No, 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 definitely, definitely. And this is the part where we're going to start now going from, the fun stuff into where the risk actually lies. We've talked before in the series about labels versus labeling and how words alone can create regulatory risk, even when the formula itself hasn't changed.
Mhm.
And influencer content adds an entirely different layer of complexity because once a product leaves the brand's mouth and enters the creator economy, the brand is no longer in control of the language and the framing, or even the conclusions being drawn by the audience. I mean, let's be clear, influencers are content creators. The content they create is their own, but the product being discussed still belongs to the brand. And that's where things start to blur. What sounds like personal experience can begin to function like a claim. What feels like something that was just storytelling can start to resemble labeling. And cosmetics products, through repetition and emphasis, can easily drift into OTC territory without a single change to the formula or the package. So let's talk about where the line actually gets crossed. So in either of your opinions at this point, does influencer content stop being personal opinion and start functioning as like a claim? And at what point have you seen this happen? Jen, you want to take that one?
Absolutely. There's one that I'm horrified by, and I'm wondering, what is this going to involve, and how do they fix it? For example, there's this beef tallow is trending, and I see a bunch of young male influencers, and more so male influencers than the female ones, and they'll go and they'll apply the product, and they'll talk about how it just basically their acne is completely gone.
Oh, God.
And that's a big no-no. But
Mm.
also where the risk is that that they are incentivized because they're making a commission each time you go and you buy it from their TikTok shop. And I think that's a really touchy one. There was another one. And this one, I don't know how I missed this one in my career. Prid, is it Prid drawing, serum drawing, something? It's like it's something that draws things out of your skin.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, there was a product. I'm trying to remember what it was called back in the
Prid.
80s
It's an
that we
old
used to
product.
use called Traxa. I don't know if it was ever sold in this country, but it was called Traxa. And if you've got a small thorn or something in your finger or
Yes.
whatever it is, you can put it on and withdraw it out. Yeah, yeah,
This does. Yes. And
yeah.
they're putting it on marks on their skin that, we don't know. You have to have a dermatologist. If you have a mark on your skin, you want to have a
Yeah.
dermatologist. So that's another one. And I saw that one go viral and I was pretty shocked by that one. So that's, again, like you're saying, it's definitely crossing the line in my opinion. I don't know if Blakely, have you seen anything like that? There's some wild ones out
Well,
there.
well, to add to that, I would say certain products that an influencer might kind of slip a line in there that it's like it compares to, or it's better than a prescription product. And I see
Oh,
that a lot with like
yeah.
vitamin A based
Mhm.
serums. And so,
Right.
like that, I'm like, that, I kind of have a moment when I
Yeah.
see
There's
that.
a pharmacy guy out there too who I mean I think he's awesome. I at one point wanted to have him for one of my products. But he mixes things and like no nose drops and this one and that one and he talks about it and I'm like, whoa, that's some risky territory in my opinion. So yeah.
Yeah,
I wonder if
absolutely.
he gave them the idea for the vaginal cream on your eye.
Maybe.
But you know what? It is funny though to see the difference between female influencers and male and the
Mhm.
things that they're drawn to. And like beef tallow is a great example. It's so male territory
Mhm.
because I think us girls, I'm just so grossed out by it anyway
Yeah.
that like the thought of putting cow fat on my face just nauseates me. So it never gonna happen. Besides the fact that I know what it actually is and what it actually does. So
Right.
it belongs nowhere near your skin,
Yeah.
in general,
This is
let
when the
alone
new
near
vegan
acne.
was
Yeah.
over. Yeah. Like I was like, where are the vegans?
That's
Well,
a good
yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, we're the climate people. Hey, 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 but but it is interesting to me the things that the male audience would gravitate toward versus female, and the whole psychology of this. I just think this topic is so super interesting.
It really is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Jen, as a brand owner, how much control do you actually have over what these influencers have to say? And is there recourse?
I mean, we have some control, but no at this point because they're like I said, a lot of these influencers and micro influencers, they're going through the pages and looking for different products that they can go and say something that's going to really help them go viral and make some interesting content, and that's all they're thinking about doing. And we have no control over that. Where we do have control is, when they are one of our influencers and they're working with the brand, then we should do trainings and I always send guidelines of what can be said and what can't be said. I don't tell them what to say, but I do make it very clear of, hey, this is what you can speak to, this is what you can't speak to. Run it by us, let us take a look. And at least when it's not alive, you really can control what's being said in that aspect. But like I said, these ones that are looking to get brand deals, and there's so much of that out there. There's so many even just young girls that want to be influencers, and they'll get a product as a Christmas gift or a holiday gift, and they'll start talking about what it does for them, and making all kinds of claims that did this and that. And one, they shouldn't even be using the product; they're too young. But it's just there's not much you can do because they think that this is going to help them become influencers, and they almost want to make it look like they're even putting ad in their hashtag so that other teens believe that they have a deal with the brand. So it's, it's very complicated, if you know what I'm saying, like how I'm
mm,
explaining it.
mm,
It looks confusing, like, do they have a relationship with the brand? But it's like, no, they're just, they're just making it look that way.
mm,
So
mm, mm,
there's just some control and then there's no control. So we have both.
mm,
It's
mm.
a
Blakely, I don't know
complicated.
if you want to add to that.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, from the standpoint of like marketing and communications, I completely agree with creating parameters, like a container for influencers to operate within, and not necessarily telling them what to say, like writing out talking points. You definitely want them to have a little bit of um, ethical room to say what they feel about the product and not tell them what to say about the product, but having them understand the container of, what kind of claims they can state and certain language they need to avoid is absolutely the way to handle that. And then, of course, previewing the content when possible, I think is, the ultimate protection measure for a brand.
Mm-mm. Look, I mean, Mocha is so new. It's like it's still confusing for people, within the industry. Whether they're contract manufacturers or founders or, whoever. We can't expect, influencers now to be understanding the nuances of, FDA and MOCRA. But, the key, though, is that the FDA doesn't evaluate intent. They evaluate impact. And this is the point at which influencer messaging functions as de facto labeling. And what I mean by that is that, the FDA is there and we have guidance to protect the public health. And that's why intentions don't matter because what they're doing is they are evaluating the impact of what your message had, on the public and on the public health. So, let's talk about hacks for a second here, because I think that's where things really do start to go sideways. Jen, you and I had an in-depth conversation when we did our episode about dupes. And I feel like this is the next evolution of that same issue. And what starts as experimentation or optimization, right, quickly turns into complete and utter misuse. Products are layered, combined, occluded, used off-label in ways we had never thought about, let alone tested or intended for. And the problem is that the influencers who do all these things are then rewarded by the algorithm for being extreme, novel, provocative. And once that behavior is normalized through repetition, it spreads fast. But because the behavior, is not safe, it creates havoc. A lot of, if an influencer is following the intended use of the product, that's one thing. But when they go off, on a complete tangent and start using a product in a way that was never meant to be, now all of a sudden, we don't know whether that's safe. And this is where brands often assume that, their disclaimer will help them. Things like, I don't know, results may vary or, for educational purposes only.
Yeah.
But
Maybe they
when
should add, don't try this at home.
yeah, well,
Like
yeah,
something else.
exactly. Didn't Superman have a disclaimer? But um, but when consumers follow what they see and hear, the disclaimers become meaningless. You know what I mean? They're watching what the influencers are doing. They're following that behavior, and the problem is that the accountability is still on the brand, not on the influencer when the harm occurs.
Right.
So, the real tension, to me, is that platforms incentivize engagement, right? While safety and compliance demand restraint. And the brand is kind of left kind of holding that baby, holding the gap. So,
Right.
Jen, why do dangerous or misleading hacks spread so easily in beauty content?
I mean, I think people just really want that, instant gratification, like I keep saying, and they want so badly to believe that it's going to work. And I think, they become so worried about price because the prices in beauty have gone up greatly. And that's also another issue. So I think they really are hoping, they say hope in a jar. It has always been hope in a jar my whole life, and maybe even, back in when to the beginning of beauty. So I guess they really want it to work so badly. But yes, it can go wrong. Like for example, the one influencer was having people put a certain type of hemorrhoid product on their face, which was, years ago, there was a story with the models that all completely changed the ingredients, as you know. But I think it was Tux pads or something. And then people were posting that they had rashes and burns on their face from it. And then it became combative where some people would be like, defending the influencer. No, no, this influencer knows it worked great for me. Look at how good my skin looked. And so it's a big balancing act. And it does put the brands in a difficult spot because, what do you do if you're, say, Tux? Do you come out and on your TikTok channel and say, no, no, we don't recommend you do that? Or,
Yeah,
where do you
yeah.
go from there? And it is confusing times. I mean, maybe we need, if you really seriously want to become an influencer in beauty, maybe there should be a little bit of a training course, kind of a precursor to, where you begin and what you should say and what you shouldn't say. And, maybe there's a channel that maybe we should start a
Um,
channel.
no, no, right, right. Yeah, I mean, look, these influencers, like we said, they aren't trained. They're just going to say what they need to say for clicks because they want to get that business. They want to get you know what I mean? They want to get paid for what they're doing. They don't want to do all of this for free. But there's I don't think they understand that there's a line that can be crossed. You know what I mean? Because they're not, they might be beauty influencers, but they're not from the beauty world. You know what I mean?
Right.
Talking about behind the scenes, like us. And and Jen, as a brand owner, I mean, you're pretty exposed when influencers, demonstrate all this unsafe use.
Right.
Um, but how I don't know what I'm trying to say. How are you exposed there? I mean, it's like you have, like you said before, you have some control, but not all control. And then, sometimes you're going to have an influencer who you didn't even know existed is all of a sudden talking about your products. And you're like, whoa, whoa, I didn't say you could do that.
Right.
So like I don't know. I just feel like these companies, brand owners are so exposed, and the FDA is watching you. They're
Yeah.
watching you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They're not watching the influencer. Yes, they're watching the influencer, but they're also watching you. So, so how do you handle this as a brand owner?
Well, that hasn't happened to me yet, thankfully. Although, it's not even the worst problem to have if you handle it the right way. And I think it's almost like with the reviews, back when we were doing all the Sephora reviews, and then that went bad for some brands because they were bumping up their reviews. But to turn that into a positive, I think maybe we can then, as brands go and comment. And it's hard to find everything out there, but if we can then comment in the comment section, this is, we don't advise using the brand this way. This is not how it was intended to be used. That's one way we could be proactive. That's what I would do if this happened to me. And honestly, I would just go make a video, and I would, I would do the stitch, the whole 9 yards, and I would say, love your creativity. Again, not what the brand is intended to do, but here's the parts you got right, and handle it directly. That's really all we can do at this point because it's content creation by, it's unknown. So that's
Mm-hmm.
really the only guidelines or structure we could put in place, if it happens.
Yeah,
So
and I mean, and Blakely, from your point of view as a marketing expert, I mean, do you want to react to that? Because this is the territory where influencers really go rogue.
Yeah. Well, so similar to what Jen was just saying, my recommendation to any founder or brand leadership in this case would be early on, actually sitting down with your marketing team, with a strategic communications advisor, and wargaming, right? So thinking about what could happen if an influencer that you've hired says something that you weren't aware that they were putting out there, and it had a claim, and it's now, active on the feed. Okay, so what are we going to do in that situation? What are our responses? What's our timeline? And then separately, what are we going to do? What are our responses? What are our timelines for just a regular person on social media that you haven't had any direct relationship with or official relationship with, posting about the brand, posting a hack, doing something like that? And I mean, this goes across the board, even to kind of planning out what happens if your supply chain is disrupted. What are your response times, or there's a critical packaging failure? What are you going to say? How are you going to handle that? And I think just having kind of this crisis response framework available ahead of time and able specifically to address, marketing risk is really important to make sure everyone across the brand is on the same page and feels like they can activate in the moment, that they're not stalling or waiting too long or more chatter is happening online.
So, just for the audience, for any of you out there who just think that the disclaimer is your obvious solution, just, you know, somehow put this in your mind. Disclaimers, even though they feel, I don't know, comforting, the reality is that the accountability is still on you, especially when a consumer is harmed. Your disclaimer doesn't necessarily mean anything and isn't necessarily meaningful. So just, keep that at the back of your mind. That's not the answer. All right. So let's talk about what happens after the algorithm does the job, right? Now, you have your viral moment, and your inventory runs out. Scaling is not quick. And it's not simple. And I know everybody wants that big viral moment and wants, the sold out. But there is a flip side of that coin. And at a minimum, stability testing has to be revisited, roughly 3 months for cosmetics and 6 for OTCs, if nothing changes. But if your formulation, process, or packaging needs to be adjusted in any way, then all that testing, along with any other testing that you may have done, any safety testing, sensitivity skin testing, any other panel testing that you may have done, all needs to be redone. And this viral moment, is something that you're going to have to be prepared for if this is the path you want to go down. Pilot trials, for example, will also have to be run on product equipment, your raw materials, your packaging, as Blakely had mentioned. All of these things need to be sourced and qualified and delivered. People forget that contract manufacturers need to qualify anything that comes into their facility. So that takes time. And again, your minimum order quantities, your MOQs may change. And as a brand, are you prepared to meet all those challenges? It sounds wonderful. Oh, let's just put it out into the TikTokosphere and let this thing go viral. Are you ready for that though? And so for investors who believe that virality is the hardest part of growth, this is the reality check. Virality doesn't, you know, compress regulatory testing or manufacturing timelines. You know, the part that social media never shows is that you can't simply just move to another CM, right? Contract manufacturer. Even with a tech transfer, a formula has to be onboarded into a new R&D environment, and those transfers are often way more complicated than starting from scratch. So the question isn't whether demand exists, it's whether the business was built to support it. Okay, so Jen, from what you've seen as a brand owner, where do brands most commonly break when demand spikes overnight? Like with this whole it's gone viral situation.
I see it more because obviously I was fortunate. I got to start where we were really big and we had the ability to handle, those moments and use multiple. We owned our formulas. But where I've experienced this most is in my consulting background, with the smaller brands where they didn't expect it to go viral. They maybe some don't own the formula. And that has been an issue. And they can't just go and jump to another contract manufacturer. So that's one issue. The other is a raw material, that can hold them up. So if they have any inclination that they think the product might go viral, what you really need to do is, hey, ask the questions in advance, like your word thing that you mentioned. Do we have these raw materials on hand if I need them? How quick can I get my bottles decorated? Should I have some bottles, some extra ones, which I always advise you should, pre-decorated just in case a viral moment were to come. Things like that. If you're getting product from overseas, can I fly it in versus, do I have to bring it here by boat, which takes much longer. So yeah, I mean, we always try to get brands to prepare. And like I said, I see it most through my consulting with the smaller businesses that are really getting into those breakout moments. And it's a painful thing to watch because here their dreams have come true and they're being told, oh, 90 days, we can make it happen.
90 days. Oh, that would be a
Yeah.
dream. That would be a dream. I've seen 300. So
Yeah, that's 90 is even painful. Imagine you're sold out and you hear 90 days and you're like, what?
yeah, 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 yeah. And and it's funny though, because you did mention private label. A lot of these smaller brands or new brands think private label is the best way to go. And there's definitely a debate worth having over private label. But in a viral moment, to your point, Jen, private label becomes super problematic. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Because that formula is owned by that CM or that CDMO. And there's no taking it somewhere else. You know
Right.
what I mean? It doesn't belong to you. So you're completely and utterly at the mercy of that CM. And then, Blakely, how damaging is a prolonged sold out status after a viral moment from a consumer trust and brand equity standpoint?
Yeah. So I think very short-term scarcity is going to lead to more desirability. When you start getting into those longer windows of not being able to restock, people are going to lose interest and they are going to move on to the next viral thing. Um, the momentum will just kind of die out from a publicity standpoint, and that's an unfortunate reality.
Mm, mm, mm. And I think that does affect consumer trust. Jane, I don't know what your thought is on that, but I mean, sold out is not where you want to be,
Right.
especially when you're new.
Yeah, this reminds me of the Pat McGrath, my dream makeup artist. I adore her. Remember the big runway show where they I forget the name of what it was. They put this thing on the skin where everybody's skin looked like almost like a plastic doll. And everyone wanted what she used. And the people behind the scenes, we knew the type of product she was using, but they wanted to buy it. People that watched this runway show, they were so impressed, but she didn't have it. And, it was months and months and months and months until finally the product came out. And I think by the time that it did, they lost the momentum. So thank God she's made a huge comeback. She's with Louis Vuitton and, she's even taking her original brand back. But, it's like we do have to kind of prepare for these things. And
Mm,
you really do have to have that
mm,
conversation,
mm,
like Blakely
mm,
was saying, like plan ahead. What if this happens? What is our game plan? And I
mm.
think it's so important.
And it's a good point you made there because, sold out doesn't just mean, hang on, guys, it's coming.
Right.
What it means is that when it does eventually hit shelves again, people may have moved on. They
Exactly.
forgot about it. They don't want it anymore.
Well,
And then
short
what?
term.
You're left with all this inventory that you now gonna have to, remarket.
Right.
Anyway, I do think that it's fair to say that although scarcity can build desire, because there's also that way to look at it, operational failure will erode confidence. Anyway, before we pivot to who actually owns the risk, because like I said, I want to continue down the risk conversation. I just want to level set something quickly for the audience. A key reality here for those who may be new to beauty who are watching. If the influencer said it and the brand benefited from it, the brand owns it. So that might be worth repeating. If the influencer said it and you benefited from it, you as the brand, you own it.
Mhm.
Okay, and when I say it, I'm talking about the responsibility and the risk. So, putting on my regulatory hat for a second, because this is where things stop being funny. In beauty and personal care, the FDA doesn't just look at what's printed on the package, right? On the label. They also look at how a product is being represented to consumers, what we call the labeling. When an influencer demonstrates a product, using it in a way it wasn't intended, claiming results the brand never substantiated, or positioning a cosmetic like a treatment or cure, that content can function as implied labeling, even when it never appears on the label itself. And this is the part that surprises a lot of founders and first-time investors. It doesn't matter who said it. If the influencer is paid, gifted, affiliated, reposted, even a thumbs up, even a like, or otherwise encouraged, the brand owns the risk. The FDA doesn't regulate influencers, they regulate companies. They regulate you, which means while the influencer may move on to the next trend tomorrow, you, the brand, is the one left holding the responsibility, responding to inquiries, pulling the documentation, explaining why your cosmetic suddenly has become an unapproved drug. And here's where this compounds. The same influencer content doesn't just create regulatory exposure, it also creates instant demand. So, let's talk a little bit about how going viral overnight can break a brand operationally. All right, who wants to take a first stab at this? Blakely, do you want to try that one? So, talking purely from an operations standpoint, we want the audience to understand, just beware of what you wish for.
Absolutely. And I would say this is where your marketing strategy can really test your back end and not. So, right, you're looking at marketing as a way to get more sales. You're looking at it as a way to get more visibility, maybe more publicity, but it actually boomerangs and it tests your internal operations. And so I think a lot of pitfalls that can be experienced with the overnight virality are like forecasting errors, difficulty with sourcing ingredients, and maybe even cash flow strain, right? And trying to go back around and rapidly produce more of something that you've just completely run out of. Like I said, it's a complete boomerang effect. And I think brands might not anticipate that from going viral. It seems like the ultimate objective for your marketing strategy, but it can really just exhaust all of your operations.
Mm. No, 100%. And for all founders listening, just remember that, virality doesn't just test your marketing, as Blakely just said. It stress tests your entire business. All right, so let's put on, our investor hats for a second. Look at this through an investor lens. Jen, you've had to face scale up issues before, right? As a brand owner. So from your point of view, if you're diligencing a brand, okay, so with your investor hat on, if you're diligencing a brand that relies heavily on influencers for growth, what are the red flags that you tell your brand, um, that you can instantly see, okay, you guys are not ready to scale, even if, on paper it might look strong. What are the red flags for these guys who rely so heavily on influencers for growth?
Well, I think the first red flag is you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Yes, it's a very much needed part using the influencers, but there's still, other ways. We still have, SEO is still around. There's other ways of doing things with, just promoting an ad where there's no influencer, it's just a photo, maybe with a before and after picture in a small corner. So a red flag to me is always if you're putting everything in one basket, then I think it's a mistake. I think that you really want to be very diversified in very different things so that if one maybe isn't working, especially for new brands, a lot of times they'll go and they'll work with an influencer and they don't get anything from it and they don't understand why. And they're like, what happened? Like, even if you go and you hire a top influencer and you blow your whole budget on one that gets, let's say, like $100,000 to go give you a mention in feed, and you still got very little, what do you do? So, and this is why I'm always like, make sure you're diversified, do all things. Let's, get you going in all areas, even like Reddit is an awesome one. Maybe use part of your budget to get on Reddit and, maybe post just a still ad there. There's all the different Pinterest, there's all these different ones where you can still do the cross promotion and not just solely rely on the one. So for me, I might be a little weird about it, but just through experience, like I said, I've seen where, it is a red flag to just focus on the one thing.
Blakely, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I completely agree. Influencer is to me just one part of an overreaching marketing strategy. And like Jen mentioned, there are so many avenues that brands can explore that are completely owned channels where you don't have that level of risk. And so while there can be big payoff from hiring the right influencer for your brand, and by that I mean the right amount of reach, the right kind of personal ethics just based on the content that they've produced previously. If their style kind of matches your brand style, that can be big payoff. But there are a ton of other channels that brands can use that they can internally manage and not have to worry as much about risky language being spread. Um, and then I think that's everything I wanted to say. Sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, no, look, I mean, to both your points, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You can't rely, purely on the influencer sector, and take the risk of somebody, going rogue. So I just want to talk about regulation for a second. Because neither of you come necessarily from a regulatory background, but you both do live in the real world of brand building and marketing. So with that, let's talk about how brands actually try to manage the issue, because the pressure to grow doesn't stop just because the risks are real. So if influencers aren't going away, right, and the pressure to grow certainly isn't, then the real question becomes how brands manage this responsibly. The strongest brands don't try to eliminate risk by shuttering creativity down. They put guardrails in place that preserve influence and momentum while protecting the business underneath it. That means thinking about regulatory and operational readiness before a product goes viral, as we've discussed, not after. It means aligning marketing with quality, regulatory, and supply chain realities, as we also mentioned. And it means understanding that influencer-driven growth isn't only an asset if the infrastructure exists to support it. From an investor perspective, this is often where the difference shows up. Two brands can have identical reach and sales velocity, but only one has done the work to make that growth durable. So, with that in mind, Blakely, what separates brands that survive virality from those that collapse under it?
Yeah. So, a few things. I would say having that cross-functional alignment within a brand where marketing and regulatory and operations teams are all just on the same page and growing at the same rate, right? And by that, I mean just having the same understanding about how to scale up operations and what's being said about a brand. I feel like if one area or another gets siloed, that's where the internal breakdown can start to have like public breakdown. The other thing we already discussed is having those influencer guardrails. So creating containers where you're maybe providing some claims guidance to your affiliates, and then also creating some language boundaries for them to follow. Not necessarily like in the realm of talking points, but just making sure that they understand the container in which they should operate when they're describing their experience with a product. And then last thing, when we've touched on this quite a bit, but just scale, like planning for scale before you need it, making sure that you have all of your ducks in a row and you understand what it's going to take to scale up and that you're prepared for that and not caught, with huge lag times and dwindling interest.
Mm, mm, mm. While we're coming to the end of our conversation here, and this is a question I'm going to ask both of you, but Jen, I'm going to start with you, from a founder perspective, from a brand owner perspective. Do you have any final words of advice that you want to give a new founder thinking of taking the product influencer pathway?
I think again, it's just about, having the control. Maybe if you're going to be working with an agency, where you really, maybe you're getting in exchange for product reviews. Those are kind of hard to get, the points that you want. So it might be better maybe to find a group, of people that you can actually meet with, and in person might help, or maybe through a Zoom or something like that, and really start to have like, kind of an exchange of ideas and some direction instead of just putting it out there, sending out my product and hoping for the best. So I always like to plan, right down to, if you do become viral and something works and clicks, to having your calendar set where, you know what you're going to be launching for the next several months and, or what promotional ideas you're going to be working with. So I think it all just kind of ties together. And it's got to be a lot of communication. It's really the key with the influencers.
And Blakely, from an investor standpoint, let's just look at, a lot of them think that, going viral through an influencer is the best way to do their marketing. So, what do you say to them when that's the mindset?
Well, I would advise that again, influencer marketing is just one small piece of an overall marketing strategy. But if you're interested in using influencers as a growth mechanism, I would say that you also need to ensure that there is an internal governance that is at the same scale as the ambition of the influencer marketing. Just making sure that you have the internal frameworks and the checks and the risk analysis and the canned responses and the action plan to match that level of risk. It is definitely okay to use influencers as an accelerant for your brand.
And I mean, just throwing this out there to both of you, is there anything that, you guys would want to say to influencers themselves, who may be looking to get into beauty, thinking this is an easy path to a paid influencer gig,
I have something to say. I mean, reach out to us. We're always
right?
posting on
Right.
LinkedIn. Where are you, influencers? We put out ads. I think the world has changed so much where you can reach brand CEOs now, or upper management, or the person in charge to talk about, even if it's just your dream. And I have had a lot of, people that are just coming out of college, or talking about they want to get into the beauty industry. And I love when they reach out. And I love to, maybe spend a few minutes, hop on a Zoom call with them and talk about, hey, you can do it this way, and that way. And I honestly, brands should not be afraid of working with influencers that have never done that kind of thing before, because their honesty and their excitement is so genuine. So, even working with someone new, I think is a great thing to be always be
Mm,
open
mm,
and
mm.
reach
So,
out.
but Blakely, like continuing on that thought, because that's a good point, Jen, is, people tend to want to know, okay, so who are the best influencers? Who are the top five that I should be working with? But
Yeah.
to Jen's point, you've got these newbies coming in who are just so excited to be here and have the opportunity that, yeah, absolutely, why not give them the chance? Again, I feel like, that whole saying about teaching an old dog new tricks, maybe the new person is somebody who you would be able to guide more easily than that established influencer. I don't know what your thoughts are on any of this,
Yeah,
Blakely.
I do. I have a couple of thoughts on that. So, yes, I agree with what you just said, Mallory. Having someone a little bit newer to the game and being able to advise them on things like claims and compliance, I think would be very beneficial to someone coming into the space for them to be able to carry on that knowledge and maybe even continue to work with your brand. But separately, I would say for anyone who wants to be an influencer or is, and they feel like they're not where they want to be in terms of audience growth, I think that the most impactful influencers are not necessarily the ones that have millions of followers. I think the more impactful ones are in the five-figure or six-figure follower count because they probably are very niche and they probably have a higher trust sentiment than someone that just has a huge swath of audience members. And I think that brands should look at those people with a smaller following for that reason. I think they have a smaller following because people are watching their content more consistently. They didn't have just a viral video go out and collect a whole bunch of followers because they said one thing funny, but people aren't really looking at what they're posting after that. And so I do think that that's something that influencers who are new should understand. It's good to be niche and have a smaller audience. They're probably paying closer attention. And I think that brands should understand it's okay to work with that person with a smaller following. They're probably really good at selling your product. So
Mm,
that's just my
mm.
thought.
Yeah, Jen, I don't know if you want to add to that. Any thoughts?
I mean, I think it's like I said, the big follower, the ones with the big follower count is great, but it is so much now more algorithm based where, even just to train someone that you just started working with that's new, you can put them on a live, maybe go on together with them. things like that. There's plenty of ways to keep trying new things. It doesn't have to all be the exact same model. And I think that was what's great about with, QVC home shopping. We were always trying new things. We were doing different demos, lots of different things happening. And I think, that's what works. So.
Okay. All right. So in closing, with everything that you guys have just heard us discuss today, here's the takeaway. Influencers can create demand instantly. Manufacturing, testing, and compliance, however, still move on real timelines. Brands that survive virality aren't the loudest. They're the ones that prepared before the algorithm noticed them. And that is the crux that we've been talking about today. In beauty and especially OTC, growth without infrastructure isn't scaled. Isn't scale, it's deferred risk. Jen, Blakely, thank you both for taking the time to join me in this discussion today. It was so much fun and such a pleasure to talk to you both.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. It was a
It
lot
was
of
a lot
fun.
of fun. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And we're definitely going to do this again. This is the first time that we're actually having like a group conversation. But I actually liked the fact that, we had some varied points of view here. So thank you guys. And for those watching and listening, if you found this video valuable, like it, share it, and subscribe here on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. You can follow Jen and Blakely on LinkedIn, where we all share our thoughts and expert insights on the issues and answers that drive smarter beauty investment. I'm Mallory Johnson. Thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you all next time.